The church fell silent as my sister Amanda approached the podium. Her designer black dress, worth more than my mortgage payment, rustled against the hardwood floor as she placed a leather folder on the stand and adjusted the microphone. Her perfectly manicured hand reached for my 10-year-old son Jackson, pulling him close beside her. "Before we say our final goodbyes to Michael," she announced, her voice breaking with rehearsed emotion, "there's something you all need to know." My fingers tightened around the crumpled paper in my pocket, my husband's real will, the one I'd discovered hidden in his workshop just hours before his funeral. 3 years of silence from Amanda, and now here she was, center stage at my husband's funeral, about to claim my child as her own. "Jackson isn't Sarah's son," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "He's mine and Michael's. I have proof, and his will confirms it." Gasps rippled through the room. My mother squeezed my arm, whispering, "Don't let her do this." But I remained frozen, watching this theater of lies unfold. The sister who'd tormented me since childhood was making her final, most devastating power play, using my husband's death to steal my son. What Amanda didn't know was that I had finally found the courage to fight back, and the document in my pocket would shatter her performance in ways no one in our family could have predicted. Growing up in suburban Ohio, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. A successful father who ran his own construction company, a mother who volunteered at every school function, and 2 daughters just 2 years apart. But inside our colonial-style home with the American flag waving out front, a different reality existed. Amanda was always my father's favorite. She was the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the one with the 4.0 GPA headed for an Ivy League scholarship. I was the quiet one, good at art, but not spectacular at anything that mattered in our achievement-oriented household. At family barbecues, my father would introduce Amanda to his business associates first. "This is my daughter Amanda, headed to Princeton next fall." Then, almost as an afterthought, "And this is Sarah." When I was 16, I spent months creating a painting for my father's birthday, a landscape of Lake Erie where we used to vacation. At his birthday dinner at Applebee's, he opened Amanda's gift first, a leather-bound collector's edition of Hemingway he'd mentioned wanting. "This is perfect, Princess," he beamed. When he unwrapped my painting, he simply said, "That's nice, honey," before setting it aside to take a business call. That painting ended up in our garage, never hung. The Thanksgiving I turned 21, I brought Michael home to meet the family. He was finishing his master's in engineering, handsome, kind, and genuinely interested in my artwork. Amanda was between boyfriends and spent the entire dinner flirting with him, placing her hand on his arm while asking about his career prospects. Later, I overheard my father telling my mother, "I don't understand why he'd choose Sarah when Amanda is clearly interested." Despite Amanda's efforts, Michael proposed to me 6 months later. We had a modest wedding at the Methodist church downtown, nothing like the country club ceremony Amanda had always talked about having. My father's toast at our reception mentioned how surprised he was that I'd found someone so accomplished. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. 2 years into our marriage, we were struggling to conceive. After multiple failed fertility treatments that drained our savings, we got the miracle we'd been praying for. I became pregnant with Jackson. During those 9 months, Amanda suddenly became interested in our lives again. She'd stop by unannounced, bringing baby clothes and offering to help with the nursery. I was so grateful for this new closeness that I didn't question her motives. Michael's construction business was just taking off when Jackson was born. My sister threw an elaborate baby shower at her downtown Columbus condo, inviting everyone from our extended family. "I want to be the best aunt ever," she declared, holding Jackson before I even had a chance to. My mother later told me how Amanda had whispered to her, "He looks just like me, doesn't he? Must be the family genes." What none of us knew then was that Amanda had been seeing Michael in secret, not romantically, at least not at first, but meeting him for coffee to discuss a special trust fund she wanted to set up for Jackson. I discovered these meetings by accident when I found receipts in Michael's truck from a coffee shop across town. When confronted, he dismissed it as nothing, just Amanda being helpful with financial planning given her background in law. The breaking point came at Jackson's 7th birthday party. We'd rented the community pool, bought a Spider-Man cake from the local bakery, and invited his entire class. Amanda arrived late, carrying an enormous gift, a junior dirt bike that cost thousands. "Michael and I picked it out together," she announced to everyone. "He told me it's exactly what Jackson wanted." Michael looked stunned. They hadn't shopped together. When I questioned him privately, he admitted Amanda had been pushing boundaries for months, calling late at night about emergency legal questions, showing up at his office unannounced. He'd been trying to handle it without worrying me. 3 weeks later, Amanda disappeared from our lives completely. No calls, no visits, no explanation. Jackson asked about his aunt for months before eventually stopping. Michael seemed relieved, throwing himself into work and our family life. We were happy, truly happy, for 3 peaceful years. Then Michael was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4, terminal. The night before he died, delirious with pain medication, he clutched my hand and whispered, "The workshop, behind the pegboard. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." The morning after Michael died, while Jackson was still asleep, I went to the detached garage that housed Michael's workshop. The space smelled of sawdust and motor oil, so painfully familiar it made my chest ache. The pegboard hung on the back wall, organized with Michael's precision, wrenches, screwdrivers, and pliers, all in their designated spots. I ran my fingers along the edge and felt it, a slight gap between the pegboard and the wall. Pulling gently, the entire board swung outward on concealed hinges, revealing a small metal safe I'd never known existed. The combination was our anniversary date. Inside were documents, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Michael's handwriting. The letter explained everything. Amanda had been blackmailing him for years. During a moment of weakness when our marriage was strained by fertility treatments, Michael had slept with Amanda once. She'd claimed to be pregnant afterward, but eventually miscarried. The affair haunted Michael with guilt, but Amanda's blackmail was about something else entirely: financial fraud in Michael's company that she'd helped cover up as his occasional legal consultant. If exposed, he would lose everything, including his ability to provide for Jackson and me. The USB contained recordings of Amanda's threats and the real will, notarized 3 months ago, leaving everything to me and Jackson with explicit instructions that Amanda was to have no contact with us. Michael had been planning to expose her, but the cancer progressed too quickly. I barely had time to process this betrayal when my phone rang. It was the funeral director, calling about final arrangements for the service scheduled for the next day. Then my mother called, her voice tense. "Amanda's back. She's talking to everyone, saying she needs to speak at the funeral. She says she has Michael's will." The funeral home was the oldest in our small Pennsylvania town, where we'd moved to be closer to Michael's aging parents. Built in the 1890s, its dark wood paneling and stained glass windows gave it a solemn dignity. By 9:30 a.m., people were already arriving. Michael's employees, our neighbors, church friends, and family from both sides. I stood in the anteroom with Jackson, straightening his tie, Michael's tie, shortened for his small frame. My son's face was pale and confused. At 10, he understood death, but couldn't grasp the permanence. "Will Dad be able to see us from heaven today?" he asked. Before I could answer, the door swung open. Amanda stood there, transformed from the sister I remembered. Her blonde hair was now an elegant chestnut brown, styled in a sophisticated bob that matched her expensive appearance. Behind her stood a man I didn't recognize, tall, wearing a crisp suit with a subtle pin on his lapel that I later realized identified him as a lawyer. "Sarah, darling," she said, embracing me with the scent of designer perfume overwhelming my senses. "This must be so difficult for you." She turned to Jackson, kneeling to his level. "And Jackson, you've grown so much. You look just like your father." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. The way she emphasized father felt deliberate, loaded with hidden meaning. "Mrs. Brooks?" The funeral director appeared, his face professionally somber. "We're ready to begin whenever you are." "Actually," Amanda interjected, "there's been a slight change to the program." She handed him a revised order of service with her name listed as the main speaker. "I don't recall approving this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady for Jackson's sake. "Oh, Michael would have wanted me to speak," Amanda replied, patting her designer purse. "I have documentation to that effect." As we moved toward the main chapel, I saw my in-laws already seated in the front row. Michael's mother's eyes widened at the sight of Amanda, whom she'd met only twice before. Next to them sat my parents, my father looking distinguished in his best suit, my mother's face tight with worry as she watched Amanda lead Jackson down the aisle, her hand proprietarily on his shoulder. The service began with traditional hymns and a eulogy from Michael's business partner. Throughout it all, Amanda sat beside Jackson, occasionally leaning to whisper in his ear, her hand resting on his knee. I sat on his other side, feeling increasingly isolated as the ceremony progressed. During a piano interlude, Amanda slipped a note onto my lap. "We need to talk privately after this, about Jackson's future." My hands trembled as I read it. When the minister asked if anyone else wished to share memories of Michael, Amanda immediately stood, clutching her leather portfolio. She approached the podium with practiced confidence, setting down the folder and adjusting the microphone. "Michael Brooks wasn't just my brother-in-law," she began, her voice breaking at precisely the right moment. "He was one of the most important people in my life." She paused, looking directly at Jackson. "And the father of my child." The chapel fell silent. Even the funeral director froze mid-step in the side aisle. What many of you don't know is that Michael and I shared a special bond, one that resulted in the greatest gift of my life. She opened the folder, removing what appeared to be legal documents. "I have here Michael's will, which not only bequeaths his business holdings to me as his legal partner, but also confirms his wish that his biological son, Jackson, should now be returned to his rightful mother, me." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the congregation. Jackson's hand tightened around mine, his face crumpling in confusion. "Mom?" he whispered. My mother half rose from her seat before my father pulled her back down. Michael's parents looked shell-shocked. The minister shifted uncomfortably behind Amanda, clearly unsure how to proceed with this unexpected turn. I felt the real will burning in my pocket as Amanda continued her performance, tears streaming perfectly down her cheeks without smudging her makeup. I've respected Sarah's role in raising our son while Michael and I handled some complicated legal matters, she continued. But now that Michael is gone, it's time for the truth to come out. It's what he would have wanted. As she spoke those words, thunder cracked outside, a summer storm breaking at the most theatrical moment possible. Amanda smiled slightly, as though even the weather was validating her claim. I sat frozen as Amanda continued her performance, watching faces turn toward me with expressions ranging from sympathy to judgment. Jackson's small body trembled against mine, his whisper barely audible. "That's not true, is it, Mom?" Something in my son's voice, the fear, the confusion, ignited something primal inside me. I'd spent my entire life shrinking under Amanda's shadow, accepting my place as the lesser sister, the disappointment. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Jackson. I stood up. "Amanda," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "That's enough." She paused mid-sentence, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Sarah, please, this is difficult for everyone, but the truth—" "The truth," I cut her off, stepping into the center aisle. "Let's talk about the truth." The funeral director moved forward as if to intervene, but stopped when I pulled the envelope from my pocket. "Michael left something for me, too," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The night before he died, he told me where to find his actual will, the legal one, notarized 3 months ago." Amanda's smile faltered slightly. "Sarah, grief makes people delusional. I have the official." "What you have," I continued, walking slowly toward the podium, "is a forgery, just like the story you're telling is a lie." I turned to face the congregation, seeing familiar faces from every chapter of our lives. Michael's high school baseball coach, our neighbors who had brought meals during his illness, colleagues who had worked alongside him for years. "My sister has always wanted what I have," I said, "from childhood toys to college opportunities to my husband's attention. But this," I gestured toward Jackson, "this crosses a line that can never be uncrossed." I opened the envelope and removed Michael's letter, the real will, and a small USB drive. Michael left evidence of Amanda's blackmail scheme. For years, she threatened to expose financial irregularities in his business, irregularities she helped create as his occasional legal consultant, unless he gave her what she wanted: money, power of attorney, and, eventually, a claim to our son. The lawyer who had accompanied Amanda shifted uncomfortably, eyeing the documents in my hand. "Jackson is my biological son. Michael is his biological father. We have medical records from our fertility clinic, birth certificates, and DNA tests Michael secretly conducted when Amanda first began making these claims 3 years ago." I handed the USB drive to Michael's business partner. "This contains recorded conversations between Michael and Amanda. Conversations where she threatens to destroy his reputation and our family unless he complies with her demands." Amanda's face had transformed, the practiced grief replaced by cold fury. "You're making this up. Michael loved me. We had a connection you couldn't understand." "The only connection you had was the one you fabricated," I replied, "and leveraged through blackmail." I walked to Jackson and placed my hand on his shoulder. "My son deserves better than to be a pawn in your games." Amanda lunged forward suddenly, grabbing for the will in my hand. give me that. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to take what's rightfully mine." Her movement was so violent that several people gasped. Michael's father stood up, his weathered face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Amanda." But Amanda wasn't listening. In her desperate grab for the documents, she knocked over the large framed photo of Michael that stood on an easel beside his casket. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor. "You see," I said quietly as the room fell silent again, "this isn't about grieving Michael. This is about possession, control." I handed copies of the real will to the minister and to Amanda's lawyer. "This is the legally binding document. As you'll see, it explicitly states that Amanda is to have no contact with me or Jackson. It details her blackmail and the reasons Michael felt compelled to hide the truth." Amanda's lawyer scanned the document, his expression growing increasingly concerned. He whispered something to Amanda, who shook her head vehemently. "You're all being fooled," she spat out. "Sarah was never good enough for Michael. He told me so himself. He was going to leave her for me." My father, who had remained silent until now, stood up. "Amanda, that's enough. You need help." For the first time in my life, I saw my father looking at Amanda with disappointment rather than adoration. The realization seemed to hit her like a physical blow. "Jackson," I said, turning to my son, whose eyes were wide with confusion and fear, "would you like to go outside with Grandma for a minute? I think we need some fresh air." My mother immediately came forward, taking Jackson's hand. As they walked toward the side door, I turned back to the congregation. "I apologize for this display. Michael deserves a more dignified remembrance, but he also deserves the truth to be known." I paused, looking directly at Amanda. "My sister needs help, not an audience. This funeral is for those who truly loved Michael, not those who saw him as a means to an end." With that, I walked out, following my mother and son into the garden behind the funeral home, where the summer storm had passed, leaving everything washed clean and glistening in the emerging sunlight. The days following Michael's funeral passed in a blur of legal meetings and difficult conversations. Amanda was escorted from the funeral home by her lawyer, who later called to arrange the return of the forged documents. He also informed me he would no longer be representing her. The recording on the USB drive was damning. Amanda explicitly threatening Michael, demanding money, and plotting to claim Jackson as her own. My father came to see me the evening after the funeral, sitting awkwardly at my kitchen table while Jackson played video games upstairs. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, the confident businessman replaced by a troubled father facing his own failures. "I didn't know," he said finally, "about Amanda, about what she was doing to you and Michael." "You never wanted to know," I replied quietly. "Amanda was perfect in your eyes." He stared at his hands. "I pushed her too hard, expected too much, made her believe that winning was everything, no matter the cost." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "And I failed you by making you believe you weren't enough." It wasn't the apology I'd spent decades waiting for, but it was a start. We talked for hours that night, really talked, perhaps for the first time, about his own father's impossible standards, about the praise he'd withheld thinking it would push me to achieve more, about the pedestal he'd placed Amanda on that ultimately set her up for this fall. Michael's parents were devastated by the revelations, but rallied around Jackson and me with unwavering support. His father, a retired contractor, started coming over to finish the backyard treehouse Michael had begun building. His mother taught Jackson to make Michael's favorite cookies, telling stories about Michael's childhood while they baked. 2 weeks after the funeral, a package arrived from the state correctional facility where Amanda was being held pending trial for forgery, attempted fraud, and the financial crimes outlined in Michael's evidence. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Sarah, I know you won't believe me, and you have no reason to, but I'm sorry. Not just for what happened at the funeral, but for everything. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. It doesn't excuse what I did, but maybe it explains some of it. I truly believed, in my twisted way, that Jackson should be mine because I deserved the perfect family you had. I'm getting help now. Please tell Jackson I'm sorry for confusing him. Amanda." I showed the letter to my therapist, who had been helping me process the dual trauma of losing Michael and confronting Amanda. "Healing is possible for her," she said carefully, "but that doesn't mean you need to have her in your life." 3 months after the funeral, Michael's business partner discovered something unexpected while reorganizing the company finances. Michael had taken out a substantial life insurance policy 2 years earlier, separate from the one I knew about, specifically to fund Jackson's education and our future. He'd named it Plan B in his files. The policy had cleared probate without issue, as Amanda's claims had been thoroughly discredited. The financial security gave me breathing room to make decisions I'd been postponing. I enrolled in art classes at the local community college, something Michael had always encouraged but I'd never found time for. Jackson joined a grief support group for children and slowly began talking about his father without dissolving into tears. 6 months after we lost Michael, Jackson and I took a road trip to Lake Erie, to the same beaches where my family had vacationed when I was young. We scattered some of Michael's ashes into the water at sunset. Jackson asked questions about Amanda during that trip, trying to make sense of what had happened. "Was Aunt Amanda always mean?" he asked as we walked along the shore. "No," I answered honestly. "She was troubled. Sometimes people who are hurting try to make others hurt too." "Will she ever come back?" "I don't know, buddy. But if she does, it would only be after she's gotten a lot of help and shown that she's really changed." On the anniversary of Michael's death, I finally found the courage to open his workshop again. Jackson helped me clean it out, deciding which tools to keep and which to donate. Behind the workbench, we discovered a small wooden box we'd never seen before. Inside was a half-finished model of our house, an intricate dollhouse-sized replica Michael had been creating in secret. Attached was a note, "For Sarah's art studio, the back addition we always talked about. Plans are with the contractor." Tears streamed down my face as Jackson examined the detailed miniature. Michael had been planning for our future even as he was leaving us. The most unexpected development came from my father. After months of counseling and self-reflection, he approached me with a proposition. He wanted to establish a scholarship in Michael's name for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The program would include mentorship and ethical business practices as core components. Michael was twice the businessman I ever was, my father admitted. He understood that success wasn't just about profit. My mother, who had been my rock throughout everything, finally shared her own truth during a quiet evening on my porch. "I should have stood up to your father years ago," she said. "I saw how he favored Amanda, how he dismissed your talents. I was too afraid of rocking the boat." "We were both afraid," I replied, squeezing her hand. 1.5 years after Michael's death, I received notification that Amanda was being released early on good behavior. Her therapist had reached out to mine, asking if I would consider a mediated conversation. I declined. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. The addition to our house, Michael's final gift, became my art studio, where I began creating pieces that actually sold at local galleries. Jackson thrived in middle school, joining the robotics team and developing his father's knack for building things. Michael's parents became even more integrated into our daily lives, filling some of the emptiness Michael had left behind. The most unexpected twist came on a rainy Tuesday when I was teaching an art class at the community center. A woman approached me afterward, hesitant, familiar somehow. It took me a moment to recognize Elaine, Michael's college girlfriend, before we met. "I saw your name in the course catalog," she explained. "I've been wanting to reach out since I heard about Michael's passing." Over coffee, she revealed something that made the final pieces fall into place. Years ago, when Amanda was in law school, she had contacted Elaine, claiming to be doing research on Michael's past relationships. The questions had been invasive, focused on intimate details. Elaine had cut the conversation short, uncomfortable with Amanda's intensity. "She seemed obsessed with him, even then," Elaine said. "I always wondered if I should have warned you." This conversation confirmed what Michael's therapist had suggested during our joint sessions. Amanda's fixation hadn't been sudden, but had built over years, cultivated in the fertile ground of my father's favoritism and her own untreated mental health issues. That night, looking through old family photos with Jackson, I found a picture from my childhood, Amanda and me building a sandcastle at Lake Erie, working together before competition and jealousy drove us apart. I placed it in a drawer rather than the album. Some memories are best left as lessons, not displayed as reminders. 3 years have passed since that day at the funeral home. Jackson is now 13 and has his father's quiet confidence and his grandfather's emerging business sense. He started a small lawn care service in our neighborhood. The extension Michael planned is now my thriving art studio, where I teach weekend classes while running a successful online gallery. I keep Michael's real will in our home safe, not as a reminder of Amanda's betrayal, but as evidence of his love and protection that extended beyond his life. The scandal faded from local gossip, replaced by newer dramas. My father and I have a relationship now that, while not perfect, is built on honesty rather than expectations. Amanda moved to Arizona after her release. She sends birthday cards to Jackson through my mother. I've allowed this small connection after her therapist confirmed her continued treatment. Some wounds may never fully heal, but they've scarred over enough to let me breathe without pain. What I've learned through all of this is that family isn't always defined by blood or legal documents. It's built through love, trust, and showing up day after day. Michael taught me that, and in losing him, I finally found my own voice. If you're facing your own family crisis or betrayal, remember that surviving the worst day of your life means you're strong enough to face the next one. Healing isn't linear, and some days will still bring you to your knees. But keep going. Your story isn't over yet. Thank you for listening to mine. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life journeys of resilience and recovery. And remember, sometimes losing what you thought you needed makes room for what you truly deserve.